Welcome to TINAH Talks, where time is not a healer, but we believe that we all have the power to heal ourselves and take our mental well being into our own hands. This podcast is a byproduct of TINAH, the mental well being marketplace, and a community platform at timeisnotahealer.com, providing you with the best products for your self healing journey. Hit subscribe and follow us on socials if you want support on your mental well being journey. We're your hosts. I'm Kelsey. This is Sophie. And this episode is all about happiness. What is it? How do we get it? What gets in the
Yeah,
way of it? All the good things.
yeah. Well, August is happiness month, so we figured it would be rude not to do an episode on being happy.
Yep. It'd be very rude not to do that. Well, so we could talk a little bit about, I think, what happiness means to us. I guess maybe we'll start there before we go into like, what do psychologists look for when they're like trying to determine if someone is happy, and what does that mean on like a scientific level of what's happening in our brain? But like, what does it mean to be happy to you?
That's a really big question. Um, I think happiness for me is when you feel safe, when
Mhm.
you feel like you are excited and like, everything is kind of, what's the word? Like, just your cup is overflowing kind of thing. You feel like everything is like inflow, everything's going really well. I feel like I'm genuinely on a day-to-day basis excited and happy to kind of wake up and start my day, do things in my day kind of thing.
Mhm.
And I think happiness, I had a moment a few weeks ago, actually. We've spoken about this a few times on the podcast, where I went to a static dance for the first time and enjoyed it. And there was a moment where the DJ played Sweet Disposition,
Mhm.
and I have never felt like this. It was like so weird. I just felt this like whole body euphoria. It's like when your nervous
Mhm.
system is really calm and you're just like, this moment is amazing. This is a
Yeah.
magical, amazing moment. Don't get me wrong. That is the very severe end of happiness, right? Like that's like the most
Right.
extreme version of being happy.
Like
There
a
are ways
peak
you can experience
moment.
that on a, exactly. There are obviously ways you can experience that on a day-to-day basis. It doesn't need to be those euphoric moments all the time. But in general, like that would be my example of like a time where I was like so happy. How about you?
Yeah. I mean, so like, I think general happiness is for sure, it's for sure like feeling safe in my everyday, like you said, and feeling like excited and like present in my everyday. Like I'm waking up like excited to do what I'm going to do, like what's ahead of me for the day. I've got excitement, motivation, whether it's like just natural motivation where it's like, yeah, and I'm feeling really fulfilled at the end of my day. I would say like that's like happiness for me, but just like you described, I've had lots of moments of like where it's like a pure moment of happiness, like there's nothing else going on. For me, it's often when I'm hiking. So like when I'm, and I think there's a Japanese word for this, but when I am surrounded by trees, like where you're forest bathing. So like I'm forest bathing and you see like the sunlight coming through the trees, like those are always my happiest moments. And I don't know if it's like the extra oxygen I'm getting from being surrounded by a bunch of healthy trees, but I would say like that has always been really great for me. Dancing has been really great for me. Sober or party wise, it's always a like happy moment for me. And then like yeah, food is not that like
Oh yeah.
I'm not I'm not someone who I've never been a person that like I cope with foods. Like if I'm feeling low or having issues, I'm not like, oh, I want something sweet. That's not how I've been. I'm more like I want sleep or I want to binge watch TV. Like that's where it'll go for me. But when I've got like some really good sushi or like a really good steak or and like I don't know if you know this about me, I have this weird thing. I love bones. So like steak bones, like any meat bones. I am that girl that's like taking a full T-bone and I am tearing the rest of the fat and tendons and everything off of it. I strip that bone clean. It's a wonderful pastime of mine. That's also pure happiness for me.
Food 100% brings happiness. Like, I agree with that. Like,
Mhm.
I definitely think that there's like activities that you can do, and again, in your day-to-day life, once every blue moon, like however often you do it, that really do bring like that kind of euphoric
Mhm.
joy, happiness vibe
Yeah.
to your life. And we spoke about this in a previous episode, but usually they are things like things that you just mentioned there. They're things that, like, you know, you did back in childhood. Probably they've
Yeah.
come from childhood and then you come into adulthood, and I feel like quite a lot of those things that really do bring you joy are because they are so familiar to you. So also, like,
Mm.
familiarity often brings happiness with it as well.
Yeah, I find, I mean, not that it like brings me, I mean, I guess I get like really happy when I rewatch an old TV show, but like they say that if you're a really anxious person, it can be really calming to rewatch old TV shows because like you know what's going to happen. It's familiar. You're kind of like part of the story at this point. You already know where it's going. There's no surprises. So that can also contribute to your happiness.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but I think like when we look at it from right, I used to work in the psych field. I did a little research for this podcast about like what do psychologists look for, right, when they're trying to measure and assess happiness. And I think there's a couple of different criteria, right? So like are you this the key kind of science, are you satisfied with the conditions of your life? Like again, I think that comes back to the safety thing. Like do you feel safe? Do you feel like the conditions of your life are are good? Like are you struggling constantly? Like that's definitely going to affect your happiness. Are you feeling fulfilled with what you are doing in life? So do you have meaning? Do you have purpose? Do you have a sense of accomplishment on a day by day basis? Are you able to experience like consistent states of flow? So like where you feel like you're just in flow with your day and like yeah, stuff happens, but you've got a good flow going for you. Um I didn't know this, but like an openness to new ideas and experiences, which makes sense because, right, if life is always going to be throwing some stuff at us. And so there are going to be new things we have to learn, we have to try. So being open to those ideas rather than having a lot of resistance would affect your level of happiness. Having positive and healthy relationships, experiencing gratitude on a regular basis, engaging in self care and treating yourself with kindness and compassion, wanting to share your happiness and joy with other people, and like feeling, this isn't to say that you're in a constant state of positivity, but your brain, you focus more on the positive than the negative. Like that's where your brain kind of immediately goes. I mean, what do you like, do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, that's a lot of like just in terms of what psychologists or therapists in the field are looking for, but I mean all of them kind of resonated with me. They hit home.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's very interesting as well about that openness to new ideas and experiences, because
Yeah.
quite a lot of people aren't open to new experiences and have quite closed mindsets. I'm the complete opposite, but
Yeah,
like,
unhappy.
I would say that for me, actually, like looking at that list, that is actually probably one that does bring me the most happiness. Like, I am somebody that really thrives in new environment, like new,
Yeah.
like change, basically. Like, I used to not, like, as a child, I remember literally hating, you know, when you, I don't know if it's the same in the US, but like every year you go into a new class, like you've got different people in the class, right?
Mhm.
So every year I'd go into this new class, and I used to hate that because it meant change. And I'd be like, oh, but
Yeah.
what if I don't make friends in this class? Or like, oh, but what if this person goes and be friends with like somebody else? Like, that to me used to be fear, not happiness. But
Yeah.
actually now in my adult life, change and openness to new ideas brings me
Yeah.
happiness, because for my personal life, it leads me closer to where I want to be in terms of like
Mhm.
my goals. So
Mhm.
the only way to get there is through that experience and that
Change.
change. But
Yeah.
yeah, everything else I think is definitely spot on. I think the only thing I would just say there is like feeling positive more than negative. I think that
Mhm.
that's definitely needs to happen, but there is also that part of like that toxic positivity
Right.
piece
Yeah.
as well to maybe touch on.
I think it's more that like you're able to identify probably when you're having a negative mindset or outlook on something, and that you're able to then be like, okay, this is not helpful. This is not supportive. How do I seek the opportunity? What can I learn from this? What can I focus on that's within my control? And that's then focusing on the positive aspect. But like, yeah, there's stuff that happen. Like you could be happy and still have a bad day, have a bad mood, right? Like that's
Yeah,
not,
for sure.
we're
Yeah.
human. And I think like for I was going to say for like change, right? It's funny how you talk about how you hated change when you were younger. Now you love change. For me, change has been just a chronic thing in my life. I had a lot of upheaval in my childhood constantly, and that kind of led into my adult years, and even now I still seek like exciting change and stuff. But I've got a tattoo, my first tattoo, that's all about like the only thing that is consistent in life is change. Like that is the only consistent thing, and so you have to continue to remain strong, find balance in it, move forward in it. And I can see like having that mindset about that has definitely allowed me to find greater happiness in my life now as an adult. Like how I view things, and instead of looking at change like the enemy, I look at it as like an opportunity or an ally, or it's just something that's a part of life, but like I get to choose how I deal with that change.
For sure. I think exactly what you said. It's an opportunity. It's an
Mhm.
opportunity to do better, get something better, level up, like
Yeah.
do something new, experience something that you may never have even thought possible for you.
Yeah.
And I think change is often looked at as like this really big, scary thing, and it doesn't need to be. It is if used in the right way. Don't get me
Mhm.
wrong, and don't think I'm not saying that it's not scary, because it
It,
absolutely is. It's uncomfortable. Change is uncomfortable, but if you can visualize the outcome of that change and what's going to happen at the end, then you can probably visualize like your happiness increasing. It might dip for a minute and then come back up, but yeah, hopefully it only positive and happy things come out of that change. So what does that look like then on a scientific level? Like what is happening in our bodies and our hormones and our minds when we are actually happy?
Yeah, so mind you, like the neuroscience behind it is not my area of expertise, but it's definitely, I know a little bit about it. So I'm sure we've all heard of the happy hormones, which is the bundle, right? We've got serotonin, which is that mood boosting hormone. We've got dopamine, which is that reward hormone. We've got oxytocin, which is the love hormone. And then we have the endorphins, which is kind of more like our, I would say, like resilience hormone. It helps us to persevere despite like stress, pain, difficulties. Um, all of these are influenced by certain things, right? So, like serotonin, 90% of that is produced in our gut. And so, when you're feeling butterflies and you're excited, it's definitely like the key main happy hormone. And then dopamine is the reward, right? So, when we eat sugar, when we see something fun and exciting, we're on it. Like our Instagram, for example, is a hardcore dopamine feeder. And right in our society right now is very dopamine driven. Like, what can I do to win? What can I reward? What can I feel good in this moment? Can I have this cookie? Can I buy this thing online? It's very dopamine driven. The oxytocin is like, if you give someone a hug, and if you give us, I think I might be wrong on the number. I'm not sure if it's like 30 seconds or 20 seconds or something, but hugging someone for 20 to 30 seconds can help naturally boost like that oxytocin hormone in your body. And then endorphins is that natural, right? Like, how do we kind of increase, well, what I was thinking in the movie Legally Bond, like exercise gives you endorphins.
Yeah.
Endorphins make you happy, and happy people just don't kill their husbands. So like, I don't know if you remember that from Legally Bond. I don't know, it's a really
No.
great line. It's yeah, with Reese Witherspoon. But she's right. Like endorphins, they increase our happiness levels, and that's why we get it from exercise and body movement and all that. And so the cocktail of those things is what's happening in your brain when you're experiencing love, excitement, happiness, like mood, that kind of thing.
That's very interesting. Like I obviously don't come from like a sciencey background, so for me that's I know the words serotonin, oxytocin, dopamine, endorphins. Like I know what all of those things mean, but I don't really understand. I've never fully understood the exact what's happening in my body kind of thing at that moment in time and why. And it's definitely something that I would like to understand more, so that because I think sometimes these they're things that you should be aware of, because particularly when it comes to like relationships, as a generalized example, our body does go through certain emotions because of these hormones, right? Because of these happiness hormones, which can lead us to have some very, well, me personally, hands up, some cloudy judgments in certain situations. But I mean, like, so it would be really useful, I think, to understand like what's happening in your body at certain times, just to kind of sense check some of the decisions that you're making, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, like, right, and I think oftentimes certain things are misunderstood, right? Like excitement can sometimes be seen like can be felt as anxiety, or like, right, you are excited but you're perceiving it as anxiety, or vice versa. And I think sometimes that can throw us off, but I think it's helpful to know like what is happening internally, because you can do certain things to boost that, right? Like exercise helps endorphins, body movement helps endorphins. There are like hugging, spending quality time, loving gestures, receiving like loving gestures, giving loving gestures, oxytocin, right? Serotonin, what you eat, like how you're eating and putting into your gut is going to affect the production of serotonin, right? So all of these things can be influenced by different behaviors, and knowing that can be really helpful on your journey of like, how can I help with my mental health or my mental wellness?
Yeah, it makes sense. So
Yeah.
based on those, then, like, have you ever had any like personal experiences where you felt like super happy, and like at that same time where there's still kind of like moments of struggle during that happy period?
Oh, that's a tough question.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, this is gonna go a little intense here. So last year, my mom, she passed, and it was very much so. It was okay, this is the experience. I knew that I was moving back to the US. I was moving in with my boyfriend for the first time. And just so happened, these were plans that were already happening. And I was coming back the beginning of June. And just so happened, like literally 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks before I was coming back, had my flight picked out. We were hardcore looking for places. Um, my mom got really, really sick, and then, like, a week before I got home, she it went into the hospital, and so, basically, I flew in. We were really lucky. We were having a hard time finding a place, but we found a place. We closed it a week before I was flying back, and flew in, and I immediately got off the plane and went straight to the hospital, and I didn't have anywhere to really stay. I could stay at her house, but I didn't have the best relationship with her husband, and so it just wasn't a comfortable thing. I mean, I would go to the house and I'd pick up her car and then like go to the hospital kind of thing, but like this was a situation where my mom was really sick and she was dying. One of the biggest moments of my life in personal relationships, where one, I'm closing a chapter of living abroad for 6 years, and an exciting new adventure living in a new city. I know I'm from around Chicago, but I've never lived in the city. I'm moving in with a man that I care deeply about. And it's like the excitement of a new apartment that like it's ours. And it's finally a place that I haven't had in a long time to like decorate and set up and do myself and everything. So this all went on like I got home, and then she was in the hospital for a full month, and at the end of that month she passed. And in between that, like we literally had nothing in this apartment. We had a bed that my boyfriend did fantastic. He got us a bed. He put it on some pallets for us. That was all we had. And so it was like moments of sleeping in the bed for the first time, setting up the TV on the boxes that we have, just so we have TV. And then because we ordered takeout and we had nowhere to sit, we would just eat food in bed. And like those are moments that I took pictures of because I was really stressed out. My mom was sick. There was a lot of conflict happening with her and her husband and all these things. And it was more or less, it was really, really shitty. And then at the end, she passed. So it was even worse. Right. So I had this like really horrible experience that was happening, and while alongside this really good experience. And I tried to document it as much as possible because I wanted to remember those good moments, even if I couldn't fully experience them in the moment. But like it is conflicting to be like, oh, I'm enjoying this moment while something horrible is happening. And I like did my best to just like experience for like the brief moment that I could, because most of the time I was at the hospital, but we would literally come back, shower, get food, and then like leave at 4 in the morning again to go back out to the burbs. So like it was a very conflicting thing. I think you have to lucky me, I've worked on myself quite a bit. I'm deep into my mental health journey and all of that, that I had really good awareness of like what I was feeling and what I was experiencing. And it's also not my first rodeo where I was doing a lot of things for a parent who was sick and dying in the hospital. I did the exact same thing for my dad. So this wasn't new to me. Um, yeah, it's conflicting. It's hard, like, and then you feel guilty at times, like enjoying a moment. And I would say to Sean, I'm like, I feel kind of guilty that I'm enjoying this right now. And he's like, just take the moment for what it is. And then we would be back, at the hospital doing what I could with my mom. I took like a
Yeah.
day of not being at the hospital and like I needed it. I really, really needed it, but I felt guilty in part because I wasn't there. So it's conflict.
Yeah, but I also think that those moments probably got you through that period of time. Like that period of time was obviously awful, and like you were going through so much, like
Yeah.
dealing with obviously all of the technical stuff that you probably had to deal with, as well as the emotional stuff. Like there was
Mhm.
a lot happening. Like those happy moments, you needed them. That probably balanced you out quite well. I would have hoped, like at least got you to a point where you could kind of function and cope, like with all of the big things that were happening around you.
Yeah, I don't know because of my upbringing and all the difficulties and everything, I am an ace in an emergency. I know exactly how to turn things on and off. I know where I got it. Like I was still working too, right? So I'm taking client calls in the hospital conference rooms. Like I was doing stuff. Like I knew how to manage my work. I knew how to manage like what was going on with her and talking to doctors and nurses and helping her organize financial thing, all this stuff, right? Like, and then, but what comes out of that is that I myself personally get put on the back burner. So like I have zero time for myself. And when I'm on and I'm like in it and I'm focused and providing and helping everywhere else. And so it's a skill and also a fault. Like it's like a powerful skill, a good skill to have, but also something that can be my demise in the same sense. So I think I've had to learn to enjoy those little moments that I could potentially have, right, alongside something really difficult. And I think for me, it was more about reflecting and seeing that like those were happy moments and that they're not convoluted, they're not diminished because of the other things that were happening in my life. But that comes with a lot of like cognitive
Yeah.
reframing and practicing.
There's always a lot of guilt, I think, when it involves like a shitty situation, or other people that maybe are going through a shitty situation, or other people that like maybe would benefit from you doing something in a different way. I'm not saying that was the case, but like there's always an element of guilt in that circumstance. And I think that takes, like exactly what you just said, it takes a really big piece of like cognitive reframing work for you to kind of eliminate that guilt. And it comes even for me, like when I'm traveling, for example, like there's I'm really happy in like the things that the way that I live, the things that I do on a daily basis, in this like nomad life that I've built up for myself. But at the same time, there's this massive element of guilt of like, like my nan just passed away. Like should I be in England? Like, should I get on a plane and go? But equally, like I have to, I don't live there. Like that's not where I live. Like I am obviously going to be going back to see my family and support my family and be there for the funeral and stuff. But like, am I meant to go then, drop everything, my life completely, and go there? There's always that element of guilt. Like, and then at the same time, it's like, well, I'm having a nice time in Barcelona as well. Like, should I like drop everything to just sit and be sad? Like, I don't know. Like, there's a real conflict of like what is right and what is wrong in some situations, I think, internally.
Yeah.
But the truth is there isn't a right or wrong answer, really.
Yeah, and I think you know what, this is a really good point. So one of the points that I wanted to talk about in this was the whole concept that when this thing changes, whatever it is, I'll be happy. And
Yeah.
oftentimes it's like, and I think it's a good thing to apply to our situations of like losing someone that we love. And it's like a permanent situation, right? And like what we're experiencing these moments of happiness, right? Like when my work stops being overwhelming, I'll be happy, right? But this is a really good example of how that's not how happiness works, right? Like when I'm done grieving my grandmother or my mother, I'll be happy again. Like grief is a lifelong emotional roller coaster. My dad passed in 2015. That shit's still not over for me. Like that still comes and goes. And I know it's different levels for different, levels of relationships that we have, but like if I were to say I'll be happy again once I'm done grieving my father, once I'm done grieving my mother, it doesn't work like that. Like you can experience happiness alongside sadness and grief and stress. We can have both of them. And I think it's about really being realistic and like how do we find the balance in it for ourselves? How do we focus on, right, allow ourselves to grieve and be sad because we need to do that in order to move through those experiences without diminishing or ignoring the moments of happiness that we can have as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's a really difficult uh, balance to find. I find when it comes to yourself, like you can obviously sit here and you can say to me, you
Right.
can reflect on it from the outside, and I can also reflect on it from your situation as well. Like, but it's and it, you're the person going through the motions, and unfortunately you just have to go through the motions. But I think it is really important to recognize that you can experience happiness and sadness at the exact same time, even and also when it comes to mental health, just tying it back to things that people might be experiencing, like the part of the TINAH community. Like, for example, one of my happiest years of my life was me living in Bali. It was also one of the most difficult years of my life because I was experiencing extreme anxiety, in some periods depression. Like there was a lot of shit going on underneath that surface of happiness, but I was happy. And there were so many moments. I just remember sitting there, like in some points in Bali, where I'd be like sat on the beach, for example, and be like, wow, my life's great. And then I'd just go home and have a full meltdown. And like it would just, but it would, I would be really confused by it because I'd be like, but why am I feeling this anxiety if I'm happy? And like even now, I think I've mentioned it, like I'm just going through a period of quite high stress, and like, but I'm still having like a good time. I'm still like experiencing moments of happiness. But at the same time, like this morning, I had a full on meltdown, was talking really negatively to myself. To be fair, I was coming on my period. So like that made me realize everything straight away, hormones.
Fair enough.
But
Fair enough.
equally, like I'm always confused every time that I have this experience of like, I'm really stressed, but then I'm also happy.
Yeah.
And like sometimes one overrides the other. And I'm like, how is this? Like, it's like a dance. You just never
Yeah.
quite can probably, I don't know how, if it's possible or if you can balance it out. I'm not sure. But it's just
Mhm.
like a juggling act, basically.
Yeah. I like that what you said about Bali because it made me think about same exact thing for me living in Vietnam. One of the happiest periods of time in my life, and I was like on it. I had like great yoga routine going. I was like set in my breathing stuff. I was getting sunshine. I had access to the beach. I was like had the community. I was building my business. I felt really good. But also this was when I became gluten and dairy intolerant, and then I didn't realize it. And as I said in other episodes, 90% of your serotonin is produced in your gut. And that is a key neurotransmitter for mood stabilization and for like affecting mental health. And so I've had major depressive episodes in my life. This was one of the major depressive episodes that I had. Like I was deeply depressed. I wouldn't say that my anxiety was really high, but I was depressed. And you could see like in my face at pictures that time, I looked really gaunt because I was having so many stomach issues and I couldn't figure out what it was. It took a minute for me to figure it out, but it triggered a major depressive episode for me, despite being in one of the best places in the world, that I have amazing friends, can be all this stuff. And I was so depressed. And my ex, specifically remember he like took me out to dinner and I like broke down crying at the table and I was like, "You're being so nice to me." Like I was depressed, like very depressed, but yet again, very, very happy. And so I think actually this brings a really good point. There's a difference between happiness and joy, and I have always had it backwards. Apparently, happiness is more so like it's a fleeting emotion, often sparked by like a particular moment or event that brings a sense of excitement and like exhilaration. It's meant to be like a mental or emotional state of like positive, pleasant feelings. Joy, on the other hand, is supposed to be a more long lasting state of being characterized by like contentment and satisfaction with your life overall. It's like it's evoked by well-being, success, the condition of your life. But I've always associated with like the opposite, right? The way that I'm describing it, like my time in Vietnam, technically by that definition would be the most joyous time in my life, right? And I had a lot of unhappy moments. But I've always used happiness as a description of like the general condition
Me
versus
too.
joy being like a moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would have thought that way around as well. And it's interesting to look at it like that because I think a lot of people will be like, "Oh, I'm unhappy with my life." But if you look at it
Mhm.
in this scenario that you've just outlined, well, actually, you probably are happy with your life, but like you're not experiencing joy in your life, in the
Yeah.
situation of the circumstances that you're in.
Yeah. Yeah. You're having happy moments, but are you really having like the joyous life that you want?
Mm,
Which I think
yeah,
brings a really good question of how do we cultivate happiness and joy in our lives on a regular basis? Um,
yeah. I guess there's loads of different ways that you can kind of do this. I think one thing I just want to touch on before we go on to that actually
yeah.
is I think obviously we both come from like travel experiences, travel backgrounds, and I think a
Yeah.
real common misconception is that people that travel are running away from something, or are trying to run away from their minds. Like I can only tell you this from experience that you cannot run away from yourself. It does not
Yep.
matter where you are in the world, like your mind is coming with you. So
Hmm.
I just think like I really want to reiterate that, like because we kind of said like, you know, like obviously joy is like your kind of like long lasting state of being and like your circumstances right now. You can still experience like unhappiness in if you're traveling. Like travel
Yeah. Oh yeah.
doesn't cure anything, any
Wipe
form
it
of
away.
unhappiness or like give you joy. You have to going into like cultivating happiness. You have to be able to cultivate that happiness yourself and
Yeah.
figure out the things that make you happy or joyful, whichever way around we're going to look at it, like what you need in your life to live a joyous life or what you need
Hmm.
to give you moments of happiness. And that is
Hmm.
cultivated. That is not something that is just going to be given to you on a plate. That is not something
Yeah.
that's just going to happen. You have to be mindful of it and understand how to create those experiences for yourself. No one else is going to
Yeah.
do it for you.
100%. You have to be an active participant. You have to do that. Um, a lot of, I love that you said that because it's a really solid point. And I think, right, so like, what are active ways that you can do this? It is learning how you can have a growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset, right? Like, it's about cultivating that optimism. Again, we're not talking about toxic positivity, but like, how can you recognize when you're having negative and unsupportive thoughts? And then limit those, like address them, and then how can you shift your perspective, your how can you cognitively reframe to what is this trying to teach me, where is there an opportunity, I did enjoy this is not helpful, what can I focus on that is within my control, that is helpful, that kind of thing. And that's all from a growth mindset. It's learning how to practice gratitude. I know we're probably all sick of hearing practice gratitude, but there's so much research around it that shows how strong practicing it on a daily basis can change the neural wiring in your brain. Um, Learning to celebrate yourself, learning to celebrate others frequently, engaging in those altruistic behaviors where you're doing, which if for those who don't know, altruism is those random acts of kindness where you're doing things for other people just for the good of doing them for other people. There's nothing that you receive in return. Practicing that compassion and empathy frequently, both to yourself and to others. Taking the time to build the healthy relationships that make you feel like you have a community that like loves and supports you. Another one that I know a lot of people don't like, but regularly setting meaningful goals. There's a reason why we see all over online and there's New Year's goals like, oh, new year, new me, like all this. But having meaningful goals can provide structure and purpose. It can give us a sense of identity and increase our self esteem, right? So, a little bit of that and building right for motivation, doing it intrinsically versus extrinsically, like AKA don't focus on pleasing others in order to please yourself. It's about focusing on what matters most to you and like the progress that you're making rather than the outward results, right? Progress over perfection. And I think last but not least, and this comes with what we were talking about earlier about that stepping out of your comfort zone and being open to change. So, really learning how to regularly challenge yourself, like learn new things, get out of your comfort zone, because that's what's going to help you continue to find the fulfillment or like the capability that you can have in your life, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
think I hope that makes sense.
100%. I just talking about like the challenge, learning new things, get out your comfort zone piece. An example for me, like where I can genuinely say I felt the most, I would use the word content. I want to use the word content. I was happy and joyful, but I would use the word like content to summarize both of them. And it was a time in my life where I had just left Bali. I had just gone through this like happiest but most difficult year of my life. And I had flown to Thailand, and I'd just come out of like a quite toxic relationship. And I was going to Thailand to kind of just get away from everything. And I wasn't trying to run away from it, but a natural move for me was to, you know, leave the old behind and then start afresh, because I like change. I thrive off change. It just felt like I was ready for it. So I went to Thailand, and I spent a few days in a monastery doing a meditation retreat, which was one of the best experiences of my life. And I'm not saying this is what caused the happiness, but one thing I do think it led to was getting me out of my comfort zone. Like that was not my comfort zone. Like sitting in a monastery, sleeping on the floor, literally being surrounded with people that I would never normally be surrounded with. And that really was pushing me out of my comfort zone. I then went straight from that into a Mai Tai camp, like a Mai Tai retreat. This is
Wow.
me. I like to push myself out of the comfort zone.
Oh, yeah.
And from that Mai Tai retreat, I was there maybe for like 3 or 4 weeks. I can't remember now. I was learning a new skill. I'd never done Mai Tai before. I am such a wimp. Like I hate being hurt. So like putting myself in a situation where I was literally being punched around the face was like out of my comfort zone. But what I will say is that those two things, and this is something else maybe to add into that list of like how do you cultivate happiness, gave me discipline and also structure. So I knew that in the morning I had to be up at 7 a.m. for my Mai Tai. I also had to be at Mai Tai at 4 p.m. and in between I probably had a yoga session, which gave me periods of time in between those sessions to work and like do my thing. And it was all working. Like my life was very in flow at that moment in time. And I can honestly say, so as somebody that has always struggled with anxiety, has always like struggled with my mental health, I've got a very busy brain. My brain is constantly active. I'm constantly thinking about something. That few weeks of my life, I can say that I was so content, happy, joyous, whatever word you want to use, because my brain was silent, like completely silent. And I felt so at peace. I felt so calm. Everything in my life was flowing really well. I was just having like this amazing euphoric happiness experience, because I just remember thinking to myself, like, I really don't want this feeling to end. And I came crashing down back to reality one day, because I was skipping, as you do in your beginning of your Mai Tai class. You skip to warm up, and I was using a weighted skipping rope. And I had already done 2 workouts that day. I was really like trying to push my body, and this was actually a bit too much. So I was doing the skipping, and the skipping rope just got caught and tripped me over, and I sprained my ankle. Now, I had just sprained that ankle 3 months ago. It only just repaired itself. So I'd sprained it.
Rough.
And immediately, and I only had like 2 or 3 days left on this retreat, and I was devastated, like
Yeah.
absolutely devastated. But I just felt like that was a massive test for me to be like, do you know what? So if you are in your happiest moment of, like, I would describe that as one of the most happy moments of my adult life anyway, because I just
Hmm.
felt so calm, safe, peace. Like I just felt pure like
Yep.
peace at that moment in my
Yeah.
life. Like nothing could have, even this didn't phase me. I didn't let it phase me. It did, obviously it did for like 24 hours or whatever, because I was in pain and it was like upsetting me because I couldn't go out and do the things I wanted to do and like finish my retreat or
Hmm.
whatever. But then I was like, do you know what? No, I've built the resilience. I know what I need to do now to get myself back to that state. And
Right.
whenever I think of like, oh, how do I want to feel on a day-to-day basis, I always think back to that moment in my life, because I was just
Yes.
like so calm. I loved it. It
Yeah.
was so great.
That So there's two things I'm going to say here based off of all that. What you were talking about with the self-discipline and the structure, that's where that I think that's that point about setting goals. That's what it is. In order to reach your goals, you have to have discipline and structure. Like you have to be
Yeah,
consistently showing up towards those things. And so I'm all I'm a structure
we
girl.
love structure.
I love my structure. So I'm all about it. And so I love that. I'm really glad that you said that. And just for those, this is a whole different episode, but those who know, structure actually equals freedom. I'll let that marinate so you can figure that out. But we could do a whole nother episode on
Yeah,
that.
it's
But
interesting
in
because traditionally, like, because I think because I came from corporate world, right? Like I have worked in a corporate environment. For me, structure has always equaled toxic
yeah,
for the most part of my life. So I've been
yeah.
trained, or I've trained myself to associate structure and routine and discipline with corporate
Mhm.
toxic shit. So since I've become self-employed, I went the polar opposite of structure.
Yeah.
Like my whole life was like, no, don't want structure because that means toxic. What I'm now realizing and what I'm now trying to build back into my life is some structure, because I've
Yeah.
realized I took it way too far the other way, which isn't healthy either.
Yeah.
So there is definitely a balance in getting that structure. And I don't think I need structure in every element of my life, but there's definitely areas of it that I need it in.
Yes. So let me rephrase that. Yes, structure equals freedom, but structure in a way that works for you
For you,
equals
yeah.
freedom, right? Like not
Yeah.
having structure imposed upon you, but creating structure for you to accomplish and do the things that you want to do in your life, for you to feel good, to accomplish certain things. That equals freedom,
Yeah,
100%.
definitely.
Um, and then I was just going to say the last point was when I look back on some of my most content moments of like where was I at in my life, when I look at that and then I'm like not feeling in a great place like now or when I was burnt out, I always refer back to that time period of like, okay, what was I doing on a consistent basis that like felt really good? I felt in a calm, safe, content. The way I've described in the past is it felt like I was at home with myself. I had come home to myself. And I always think back to that time period when I'm trying to readjust, right? Like this is a friendly reminder, guys. Happiness is fluid and shit happens in life. Life sucks sometimes, but like you have the power to one stay resilient and navigate those difficult times and then create happiness for yourself again and to have an underlying structure of your life that is mostly joy even despite life's bullshit. And so I don't know, I think I like that what you put there just about like remembering back to those times. um, and so I think this is kind of a juxtaposition, but do you think the key to being happy is being present?
Yeah, 100%.
Yes.
Yes, I do. I think that's something that I've learned. Well, yes, no, I do. I really do believe it is being present and being able to live fully in the moment. I think there are also things that you can feel happiness for that have happened in the past. And I think you can also visualize how you want to feel happy in the future as well. But
100%.
living it in that moment, the only way you're going to feel the happiness, like, and
Happy.
live it, see it, breathe it, is to be living it in the present moment.
Right.
And it's hard. I'm not going to lie about that. Like that's really
Yeah.
hard. And I try to practice that daily, and I quite often catch myself thinking, oh, but I'm worried about this XYZ, or oh shit, that happened, blah blah blah, I need to go and fix this XYZ. But then I'm like, I suddenly look at like I take a second, look around my surroundings. I'm like, okay, where are you going right now? You're on your way to yoga. Why are you stressed? Like you cannot be stressed on your way to yoga. Like you need to be present in this moment. You're going to go and do an activity, blah blah blah. And like often when you're in that yoga class or in that meditation class, you know, your mind wanders. That's natural. Like it's okay to not be present every moment of every single day, but try to enjoy the things that you're doing in the moment. That's how you're going to cultivate happiness, and that's also how you're going to create like memories of things. Like imagine, like I've been to so many different yoga classes or whatever. I'd say like some of them I don't even remember what happened, because like I wasn't thinking, I wasn't there. Like I was trying to do it to bring myself back there, but I wasn't, because of whatever reason is going on in my life. Like life's hard, like life things, shitty things happen sometimes. But yeah, it definitely helps if you can remember to always, whatever is going on for you, bring yourself back to that moment in time.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think about like an example of like when I'm stressed out from my work day, like it's like at the end of the day, I feel like I didn't accomplish enough and I'm worrying about all the things I didn't accomplish. And it's like, okay, no, like I have to reframe my thought about that. I did the best I could with what I had at that moment or how I was feeling at that moment. Could I do better tomorrow? Absolutely. But like I have to remind myself, instead of being like, oh, I can't believe I didn't do this, I should have done that. Like that doesn't help me, right? Thinking about the past, worrying about the past. And then when I start thinking about like, okay, so I put down worrying about what I did or did not accomplish today, I can acknowledge it and then put it down. And then I start worrying about, well, crap, tomorrow is going to be a day filled with X, Y, and Z. Now I'm worrying about the future. And then my anxiety is hitting real hard there. And it's like, what can I do to plan and prepare for myself? So I'm really big on to-dos, like making sure I just note down like where's my time going to go tomorrow, and outside of like my meetings and my meals, like what space do I have to work on some of those deeper things that I need to get done. um
Yeah.
and that gives me some sense of control, and to make sure I'm prioritizing the right thing is really important. But like I can do that, write it, and then put it down. It's like, okay, it's stored, it's saved. I know what I have to do tomorrow. I can't make tomorrow come any faster. I can't change what's going to happen. So like what can I do now to like stay in the present moment? And doing things like yoga, breath work, those are all really, really regrounding to keep you in the present moment, which is why I lean into them so hard. Because I got the best of both worlds, baby. I got that depression and anxiety at times.
Same, same. One thing I would suggest, and I think we said it on a previous episode as well, on alternative healing methods, is that ice baths. If you
Yeah.
ever want to bring yourself back to the present moment, get yourself into some
Hmm.
cold water, because that is one way to
Yeah.
shock your system into being the most present it will
Hyper
probably
present.
ever be.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think another really good one, which we haven't talked about, I don't think we mentioned, was like tapping. Tapping is another
Mm,
good way to like, and I don't know the exact process. There's certain key points that you tap on while you're processing the things that you're worrying about, but like it brings you into the grounded present moment of like what you're feeling, and that can be really
yeah,
helpful. So I guess consensus is happiness the end of the day is like all those things that we need to actively practice and be in the present moment when practicing them, right?
yeah,
That's how you kind of cultivate the overarching joy in life. And I hate to leave it on this note, but hey guys, it's like it's gotta be a consistent habit. It's gotta be something you show up and consistently do. It's not like you do it one and done and then, oh my God, I'm happy.
yeah. I also just want to just add to that and just say, you know, this all comes from you as well. Like only
Yeah.
you can make yourself truly happy. Like, yeah, you might have an
Mhm.
amazing partner that supports that happiness, but the reality is that partner could leave you anytime, or like you, anything could happen. You could break up. Like there's so many things that could happen. Like you have to be the source of your own happiness. You
Yes.
shouldn't be relying on it in other people. And I think that a lot of people do.
Yeah.
So I just want to put that little caveat. Like we've said all of these amazing things and like given all of this advice about how can you cultivate happiness. You don't cultivate happiness by finding it in somebody else. You have to find it in yourself. Um,
Absolutely not.
all of those things that we've spoken about today.
Yeah, it's a temporary solution. Like, yeah, can you get and be excited and happy and in love in a relationship? But, and I'm not saying that the honeymoon phase, I am a true believer that the honeymoon phase can actually last forever, but that comes from actively, consciously creating that and cultivating that in the relationship. It's no longer new, so you have to actively create it. That's the
Yeah,
same thing with the happiness for yourself. Like you might be feeling that happiness and joy from that new partner for that new relationship, but shininess wears off. And so you have to not only work on the relationship, but to maintain your personal, nobody's responsible for you and your feelings. At the end of the day, we're responsible for our own stuff. And so I think I'm glad that you made that last little point. Is there anything else that you want to add before we wrap up, or we're
No,
good?
nothing for me. I think we've summarised quite a lot there.
We did.
Yeah.
All right. Well, guys, thanks for listening to our episode today. If this resonated with you, be sure to give us a like, and we would love to hear your feedback in the comments about what topics you'd like to hear more about. Don't forget to subscribe, follow us on socials, and join the community at timeisnotahealer.com. All the details can be found in the episode description below. And remember, you hold the power to heal. Until next time, you've got this.